Kansas State University studios, this is the Kansas Ag Report with Brityne Rucker.
Coming up, two major developments could reshape the future of ethanol. From Washington to California, we'll explain why Kansas corn growers are paying close attention. Plus, is the U.S. cattle herd finally starting to rebuild? We'll break down the latest USDA inventory report and what it could mean for cattle producers moving forward.
The Kansas Ag Report is proudly brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission, Kansas Farm Bureau, and the Kansas Wheat Commission.
Welcome to the Kansas Ag Report. I'm Brityne Rucker. Now, Kansas corn growers are watching Washington closely this morning. Committee Chairman John Bozeman has added year-round E15 fuel sales to the Senate's Farm Bill proposal, the move that could increase demand for ethanol and create new opportunities for corn-producing states like Kansas. The addition is designed to build support for the bill before a September 30th deadline, but negotiations over SNAP funding remain the biggest hurdle. Lawmakers are expected to take up their proposal next week. And if Congress gets that across the finish line, another major market could eventually open up for Kansas corn. California, one step closer to allowing E15 fuel sales statewide. Regulators will consider new fuel standards in September, opening the door to what could become one of the nation's largest new ethanol markets. While the fuel likely won't reach California pumps until 2027, the added demand could create another long-term opportunity for Kansas corn growers and the state's ethanol industry. A key USDA funding account that's helped Kansas farmers through disasters and tough markets could soon be stretched to its limit. A new analysis from the American Farm Bureau Federation warns the Commodity Credit Corporation is expected to hit its $30 billion borrowing cap every year for the next decade. That fund has been used to deliver emergency assistance, including this year's Farmer Bridge Assistance Program. If Congress doesn't act, future farm payments and disaster aid could face delays just when producers need them the most. A labor dispute that has impacted cattle movement across the High Plains may soon be coming to an end. Cargill and the Teamsters have reached a tentative agreement to end the nearly 70-day lockout at the company's Fort Morgan, Colorado beef plant. If workers approve the deal next week, cattle that have been redirected to Cargill's Dodge City, Kansas terminal processing facility could begin returning to Colorado. While it won't change today's tight cattle supplies, it could ease pressure on regional packing operations in the weeks ahead. Kansas wheat producers are keeping a close eye on escalating attacks in the Black Sea. Ukraine says it struck one of Russia's largest grain export terminals, damaging infrastructure that helps move millions of tons of grain each year. The disruption is raising concern about global grain supplies and has already pushed wheat prices higher. Analysts say if export interruptions continue, the impact could eventually create additional marketing opportunities for U.S. wheat growers, including those here in Kansas. A major agricultural supplier has reached a settlement with federal regulators. Corteva has agreed to resolve an FTC lawsuit alleging the company used loyalty programs that discourage distributors from selling lower-cost generic pesticides. The case claimed those practices limited competition and led farmers to pay for crop protection products. The proposed settlement still requires court approval, while similar claims against Syngenta remain ongoing. And another major development involving crop input companies, Monsanto, backing away from a proposal that could have raised herbicide costs for farmers. The company has withdrawn its request for tariffs on glyphosate imports from China after strong opposition from national farm organizations. Grower groups argued the move would have driven up input costs during an already challenging farm economy. Monsanto says it listened to farmers' concerns and will continue pricing its glyphosate products based on market conditions. A grain company that does business with producers across Kansas under the spotlight. Omaha-based Schooler has agreed to pay nearly $10 million after federal investigators found employees authorized bribes to speed grain shipments into Mexico. The Justice Department says some of those payments ultimately reached Mexican drug cartels. Schooler says the misconduct has been addressed and the company has implemented new safeguards. And new USDA data is offering the first signs that the nation's cattle herd may be starting to stabilize. The July cattle inventory report shows that total U.S. cattle numbers edged slightly higher from a year ago, while beef replacement heifers increased at 3%, a sign some producers are beginning to rebuild their herds. Even so, beef cow numbers remain historically low, meaning tight cattle supplies and strong prices are expected to continue for Kansas cattle producers. Coming up on the Kansas Ag Report, grain and livestock markets continue to keep producers on their toes. We'll sit down with Darrell Holaday to break down what he's watching and where prices could be headed. But first, we honor a familiar face in Kansas agriculture. After 3 decades of serving producers for K-State Extension, Sandra Wick reflects on her career, the relationships she's built, and what's next. That's still ahead on the Kansas Ag Report.
Imagine turning soybean oil, used cooking oils, and waste animal fats into fuel so amazing it drives U.S. jobs and our economy forward. Learn more about biodiesel at americasadvancedbiofuel.com.
Many seed companies claim to offer the latest genetics, but how many have tested those genetics in soils just like yours? The Oldie Seed Know to Grow research program has fully tested the latest seed genetics in soils that are right in your neighborhood. The Oldie Seed Know to Grow program can recommend the best performing hybrids from technologies like Enlist, Extend, and LibertyLink that will optimize the yield and profit of every acre on your farm. Contact Oldie Seed today.
Next time you see a beautiful field of corn, reach out and thank the farmers who work tirelessly to raise corn for livestock feed, renewable fuels, and exports to feed a growing world population. The farmers on the Kansas Corn Commission work for Kansas Corn with grower-funded checkoff dollars that support foreign and domestic market development, research, promotion, and education to expand opportunities for Kansas farmers. To learn more, visit kscorn.com.
Welcome back to the Kansas Ag Report. Today we're recognizing someone who's dedicated her entire career to serving Kansas agriculture. Joining us today is Sandra Wick, a crop protection agent with K-State Extension's Post Rock District, who's preparing to retire after years of helping producers across central Kansas. Sandra, congratulations. How are you feeling as this chapter comes to a close?
Well, it's kind of a bittersweet situation, Brityne, because I want to spend more time with my family, yet the good relationships that I form with the producers of the Post Rock District and especially Smith County, because that's where I got my beginning and working in the field of agriculture.
Now, Sandra, when you reflect on your career, what are you most proud of?
I think what I'm most proud of is helping producers make decisions that will affect the rest of their lives. And the heritage of their farm. And that's what I'm most proud of, is helping them help themselves.
And you have seen the industry change tremendously. Is there anything that sticks out to you the most?
Well, what sticks out to me the most is the crops that are produced. When I started beginning in extension, it was milo and wheat, pretty much strictly. And now those have kind of gone away a little bit. I mean, they're still there a little bit, but now it's mainly corn and soybeans. So it's a complete shift in the production agriculture.
Now, finally, retirement isn't the final step, but it is a bittersweet chapter that's coming to a close. What are you most excited about with retirement and what's next?
Okay, well, what I'm most excited about is to spend more time with family, grandkids, because we have 6 grandkids. And of course, I'm excited to spend time with my husband, but it might be too much togetherness at once because he's retiring from teaching too at 52 years.
Oh my goodness. So lots of change in your neck of the woods. Well, Sandra, congratulations on an incredible career. And it's so exciting what comes next. All right, Sandra Wick with the Post Rock District. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be right back.
What does a brighter, more sustainable future look like in our cities and towns, and how do we get there? When New York needed an alternative fuel source to reduce carbon emissions, the city found what it needed in biodiesel made from U.S. soybean oil.
Grain sorghum is one of the most important cereal crops worldwide, and Kansas leads the nation in its production. Over the years, sorghum has been either exported, used in animal feed domestically, or for other industrial uses. Recently, its use in the ethanol market has seen tremendous growth, with 30% of domestic sorghum typically going to ethanol production. Kansas Grain Sorghum is committed to sorghum research, market development, and education. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org.
As producers make decisions about marketing, risk management, and planning for another challenging year, Kansas State University is preparing to bring together experts from across the country to help you out. Joining us today is Dr. Allen Featherstone, Department Head of Agricultural Economics at K-State, to talk about the upcoming Risk and Profit Conference. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, for producers who may not be familiar with it, what is a Risk and Profit Conference, and why has it been such an important event for Kansas agriculture?
One of the ways to think about the Risk and Profit Conference is just like Cattlemen's Day or Dairy Day or kind of the wheat plot tours. Essentially, this is an opportunity to hear the wide range of business and economic aspects going on within Kansas agriculture. Some of them will be right within Kansas, but some of them will take a global perspective in that the global markets certainly do affect what's going on in Kansas.
Now, really quickly, give us all the good details of when and where and how people can get involved.
Yes, in terms of it's August 20 and 21st at the Alumni Center on the Kansas State campus. The best place to go to get the full information and be able to register is www.agmanager.info, and essentially that will take you to the page that you'll need, and it's the Risk and Profit Conference.
All right, well, thank you very much. Just still ahead, we'll check in on the latest market trends and the key factors producers should be watching for in the week ahead. I'm Brityne Rucker, and we'll be right back with more on the Kansas Ag Report.
Kansas Corn reminds you that E15 fuel is the right choice for every kind of driver. For the car enthusiast, E15 has higher octane. For the thrifty driver, E15 is priced lower than regular unleaded. For the nature lover, E15 provides cleaner air. For the shopper who buys local, E15 has more ethanol from our Kansas corn farms. Choose E15 for a higher octane, lower price, cleaner American fuel. Message from the Kansas Corn Commission. Learn more at kscorn.com.
What if U.S. soybean meal were more than a commodity? If seed companies and the soybean checkoff built a better variety? That future is here. The time is now. To meet end-user demands, the soybean checkoff is investing in the compositional quality of soybeans, including meal. A message from the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff. Progress powered by Kansas farmers.
Global headlines continue to create uncertainty for agriculture, from conflicts overseas to changing weather and the reopening of the Mexican cattle border. Producers have a lot to keep an eye on. Joining us now is market analyst Darrell Holaday. Darrell, let's start overseas between the war in Ukraine and tensions involving Iran. How much of those events are influencing grain and livestock markets right now?
Well, I think they are in a big picture way. We didn't see as much this week as we have because we saw some other fundamental dominate, but it certainly has an impact on energy prices, and at times it really affects the soybean oil and the corn. And then also, I think just the high price of oil, the energy prices have really put a pressure somewhat on the consumer's disposable income, and it's pressured beef prices. We haven't seen that wholesale beef price hold up like we were seeing just 3 or 4 months ago. So that, I think, is your big global impact. And the Russian grain situation, Ukraine, also impacting wheat values throughout the world and the overall supplies. It was a yo-yo week with that, and that we really started out with a lot of tension there. By the end of the week, the wheat prices had fallen off dramatically as some new channels opened up in Ukraine and Russia.
Now, Darrell, the USDA has approved reopening portions of the border to Mexican cattle imports. What's the biggest takeaway for U.S. cattle producers, and could this affect cattle prices?
Well, it will affect futures prices because it's a psychological problem. We saw that Monday with big losses in the futures early off of that news, and there were a lot of other news. But they spent the rest of the week kind of recovering because the real supply of any cattle that will come into from Mexico start in August is going to be pretty limited to the West. Not to mention we had Mexican supplies for a long time, and all the charts will show you that we really were much high. We were plenty high when this occurred back in May of 25. As we open, it's going to be real slow. After they closed the border back in May of 25, we went 9 to 10 months still slaughtering Mexican cattle because they were already in the system. We're going to go another 9 to 10 months before we can see one head. So beef supplies really aren't affected by it, but the psychology in the market pressured it early. But we came back and we're seeing higher cash prices as we end the week. So real cash fundamentals and demand for beef will drive it. Yes, those increased supplies in Mexico caused the futures market problems, but cash fundamentals are driven more the actual cash fundamentals and the beef demand that we talked about. And those overall supplies remain extremely tight in the fed cattle market. We did have a lot of heat this week also that really led to a lot of death loss in the middle part of the country in the feedlots. So that also is tightening those supplies.
Darrell Holaday, market analyst, thanks so much for joining us. Coming up next, we'll shift from the markets to the latest developments out of Washington. Agricultural attorney Roger McEowen and CPA Paul Neiffer join us to break down key tax, legal, and farm program updates that could impact your operation. Stay with us.
Premier Farm and Home has what you need to make your lawn the best in the neighborhood.
Hi, I'm Ken. We choose Premier Farm and Home for the professional look that we do ourselves.
Feel free to stop in. You can also visit our website at heycow.com.
I will take action against herbicide-resistant weeds. I will know my weeds, and I will stop them before they go to seed. I will do whatever it takes to give my crops the upper hand, and I will use multiple herbicide sites of action because every action counts. I will take action, this time for all time.
You need a partner that you can count on to be there for your business, providing a depth of understanding to risk management issues so you don't have to. A knowledgeable support team located in your area, delivering products and services to make you more successful.
The producer-funded Kansas Wheat Innovation Center was built to get improved varieties into the hands of farmers faster. Kansas Wheat, farmers advancing their future through wheat genetics research.
Kansas Farm Bureau, the voice of agriculture, represents grassroots agriculture. The state's largest and most powerful farm organization stands up for its members through leadership development, agriculture education, legal defense, environmental advocacy, farm safety, and risk management. Members also enjoy money-saving benefits. To join our organization today or to learn more, go to www.kfb.org or find us on Facebook and Twitter.
This Medford, New Jersey school bus runs on biodiesel, and so do these. In fact, all of these buses run on clean-burning biodiesel, which is great because the more we use biodiesel in our heavy-duty vehicles, the less carbon pollution in our air. Think how great it would be if more of our school buses ran on biodiesel. More biodiesel, less carbon pollution. More is less. Biodiesel, America's advanced biofuel.
Imagine having someone help you pick the best corn hybrids for every field on your farm. Your Oldie representative can combine your data with his data to offer a field-by-field prescription. Contact Oldie Seed today at 877-692-4555.
The producer-funded Kansas Wheat Innovation Center was built to get improved varieties into the hands of farmers faster. Kansas Wheat, farmers advancing their future through wheat genetics research.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
All over the country, more and more communities are making the change to biodiesel made from U.S. soybean oil. And the decision continues, improving the health and welfare for millions of Americans while adding billions to our national economy.
Welcome back to the Kansas Ag Report. Today, we're joined by agricultural attorney Roger McEowen and CPA Paul Neiffer. We're going to cover three important topics that could affect producers' bottom line this year. That's residual soil fertility when farmland changes hands, major changes to the Farm Service Agency, payment rules under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and what farmers should expect from ARC and PLC payments this fall. Well, Roger, we're going to start with you. Residual soil fertility. That's becoming a bigger issue as fertilizer costs remain high. What exactly do we mean by residual soil fertility?
Well, Britain, what this is a concept that IRS essentially blessed with not a whole lot of guidance over 30 years ago. And what it relates to is if I buy a farm or inherit a farm, then there's value attributable to the nutrients that are in the soil. And so from a tax standpoint, what you want to do is you want to allocate some of that purchase price or the acquisition price, if it's by inheritance, to that, to the nutrient value in the soil and try to write it off over time. And so the mechanics of it is what IRS is basically left blank. And so it is kind of the wild, wild west of tax. But that's the concept in general. It's an asset that has value, just like we would allocate value to buildings and fences and tile line, those types of things. Well, let's do it to the inherent nutrients in the soil. And if there's a buildup above existing baselines, then that excess, the theory is you should be able to drive a tax deduction from that.
Now, Paul, from the tax side of things, when should producers really pay attention to residual fertility?
Really, what they should do is pay attention when they actually purchase the ground or they inherit the ground. And that's when you really want to get that soil study done so that we have a study that's really related to when that asset was purchased.
Now, Roger, if a tenant has invested heavily in, let's say, phosphorus and potassium, and then loses the lease, what legal issues should producers be thinking about?
Well, stepping aside from the tax, this really comes down to a contract issue, and hopefully they got that lease in writing and have been able to specify in writing what happens upon lease termination. Now, unfortunately, many of the farm leases are not in writing, and so it raises a question tied to state law as to what happens if you apply nutrients to the soil that have a life to it that's going to extend beyond, say, a one-year lease, because most of our oral leases in most states are just continual one-year leases that renew from year to year. And of course, if you're terminated and you put conditioners on the soil, you put nutrients on the soil, you have benefited a long-term crop, you've benefited the landlord. Are you going to get compensated for it? So they really need to address that in a written lease up front, and it is tied to state law.
Now, Paul, one of the biggest agricultural stories this year has been changes Congress has made to farm program payment rules. What exactly has changed? I know this can be a little confusing here.
Yeah, so under the old rules, LLCs and S corporations were subject to one payment limit. The new rule says that you're going to get payment limits based on the number of owners. Then over on the definition of adjusted gross income, we have a new provision that says that equipment gains are now automatically farm income, and that's effective as of June 2nd of 2026, including for 23 and 24 SDRPs. So that's really good news. Both of those provisions are wonderful news for our farmers out there.
Now, Roger, we know that you've been working with producers on entity planning for years. What do these new rules mean to some farms, and what should they consider in how they're being organized?
Well, that's a good question. There's great news on this front too, coming out of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and now implemented rules by the Farm Service Agency. For years, Britain, on the planning side of things, if we set up any type of entity structure for a farm operational entity, and it limited liability in any fashion whatsoever, so it was a C Corp, S Corp, limited partnership, LLC, those types of entities, then you were limited to one payment limit at the entity level. And it didn't matter how many payments you could conceivably receive based on your production. You only got one payment limit. Now, not only did they increase the payment limit and index it for inflation, but they changed that rule. And so these entities, the FSA rules, more closely follow the tax treatment of these entities. So unless you're a C corporation, we're going to look for actual individuals that meet the active engagement test. That test hasn't changed, and producers are familiar with that, the right-hand test, the left-hand test. So how many ever people they can find that are actively engaged up to 4 levels down through the structure, then they are eligible for a payment limit. And again, if the entity's big enough and can qualify, say, for 4 payment limits in terms of ARC or PLC payments, then you can get 4 payment limits. Whereas before, if you were an LLC, for example, you'd get 1. That's a big deal, and that's going to help cash flow at the end of the year.
Yeah, it has a lot of stuff in this, Paul. It also seems to have estate planning implications. How do these new payment rules affect transition planning?
So one example is, let's say that you inherit an interest in a C corporation. That inherited person may want to consider talking to the rest of the owners to see if you want to switch over to an S corp, especially if they have 2 or 3 or 4 owners in their fairly large operation.
Now, Paul, producers always want to know whether ARC or PLC payments are likely. What is the outlook as we head towards harvest?
Well, we have a lot of wheat growers in Kansas. We now have a final MYA price. That's that final price for 2025 at 506. That means net, net, net. Take a look at your PLC yield. That's on your 156 EZ. Multiply that by $1.03. It's actually $1.29, but you have to factor in the 85% of base acre payment and the 5.7% sequestration payment, and that's going to be your payment.
Now, Roger, what should producers keep in mind as these payments begin to materialize?
Well, I think we can just reiterate what we've said on a number of points here, and you've got to watch, take a whole farm approach is what I'd say to this. Watch your cash flow planning, watch your tax planning opportunities, maintain eligibility, try to maximize the payments because that's going to affect the bottom line cash flow, but don't do any of those in isolation. So really, I've been harping on this for a year, but this really requires, I think, the best planning is a team approach. You have your tax professional that's involved, you have your attorney that's involved, make sure your leases are structured properly so that you can maximize out your active engagement, maybe some financial planners that can help with the cash flow. So cash flow projections. So take a whole farm approach to this because the opportunities are really big here under the OBA and with the way the rules have been implemented. It's a lot of good news for farmers.
Yeah, lots of valuable information today, from protecting the value of fertilizer already in the ground to making sure that your farm business is positioned for the new FSA rules and keeping an eye on potential ARC and PLC payments this fall. Roger McEowen and Paul Neiffer, thanks so much for joining us.